He's a long way away from me over on the West Coast in a whole different time zone, in the heart of innovation land in Silicon Valley. Let me tell you a little bit about Vas. It is, I think, something like his fourth or fifth incredible company that he's building. Serial entrepreneur, executive. He's founded, incubated, scaled a number of successful companies, early employee in 2 AI companies, both of which enjoyed a successful IPO on the NASDAQ. Those were Remedy Corporation and Selectica. His current interests are in ML, data analytics, and decision sciences. But right now, he's CEO of ScoreData. You must be one of those people that's just infinite energy. And it's like, next, just so driven and so wonderfully successful. And so my congratulations on that. So ScoreData that you're leading now. Now, let me tell you about ScoreData. They use patient care analytics to enable healthcare providers to make more efficient services, to offer more efficient services. They use advanced analytics to give the platform the functionality to promote well-being and more effective treatments and disease prevention in response to several of the SDGs health targets. So according to Vas, if I quote him here, companies like ScoreData are solving the predictive patient behavior problem by computing propensities for remediation and delivering a sequence of nudges that will help the patient take medicines on time, exercise at the right time of day, eat well, and rest well. Now, of course, those same logical things can be put into other areas. We're talking about health care there, but of course, they could be relevant for the climate too. But this is Vas. He's doing it. He's a practitioner. He's leading a company that's actually trying to apply these in the real world to make a difference. So it's important to hear perspectives like that. Vas, you are very, very welcome to be here. We have about 18 minutes on the clock for you. I will move myself out of the way, make the stage available for you, and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Richard, for the kind introduction. Unlike Andreas, I rely on PowerPoint to, as props. But I have, what I'm going to talk about today. Can you see my screen?
We can, yes.
Okay, great. I'll talk about the ethics and imperatives of digital nudging, primarily from the perspective of how we implemented nudge architectures and what are some of the quantitative considerations. If we have time, maybe later on, I'll be here later during the session. If we have time, I have a couple of demos in which I can show you how we've implemented how to track global temperatures or local temperatures and how can nudges be delivered to either populations or organizations. But from a quantitative point of view, I wanted to be precise about how we define a nudge, and then lead on from there. So if you take a nudge as a unit, there are several components to that unit, subcomponents. We have implemented each of these subcomponents because we need to automate the delivery of a nudge. And there are several considerations around that as well. So I wanted to talk about some of those considerations. A nudge is an offer or a prescription. Going back to Professor Taylor's work, which Professor Schmidt just talked about. It's an action or a choice that an individual can make, accompanied with a script or a recommendation for a behavior change. But it's not just enough to have the nudge. The nudge can be a light that goes off on your printer, but it can also be a text message that comes on your phone, or a color change on your app. It can be a voice call that is delivered or an email that's delivered. So all of these are various delivery channels. But there's also, in the case of healthcare, when the patient is not able to receive a nudge, you need an intermediate agency or a deliverer who can, who can communicate that nudge to that individual. We've talked about the imperative of nudge, and the imperatives often decide what the intensity of the nudge should be. How many times should the nudge be delivered? What is the frequency and the intervals? How long should the nudge be, or how loud should the nudge be? And one of the one of the biggest stumbling blocks in the case of delivery of these nudges is, did that nudge deliver the behavior change? And so you need a feedback loop, which then communicates to the choice architect or the nudge designer. What can they change to improve the nudge? I love the way Andreas talked about the choices and the mandates, both from a government perspective and a business perspective. But in the case of healthcare, as even Richard mentioned, it's a prescribed medication or an exercise regimen or a diet modification, and the feedback loop can be made more quantitative and decisive if a care team can confirm that the prescription was followed. So once we've defined what a nudge is, I wanted to take a global view. Sorry for the very busy slide, but I wanted to at a 50,000-foot level look at all the agencies, look at all the entities that are involved, whether it's in government or whether it's in business. You decide what the outcome should be, whether it is reduce the sea level from rising, or whether you're reducing the pollutants in the air. But at a national or a global or a company level, you want to offer to educate the user about the recycling options. Looking at the right here, you want to maybe change their energy consumption behavior, or change their the medicines that they're taking, or exercise that they're performing, or the food that they're consuming. So these we call as offers, and these are recommendations for actions coupled with incentives, and that's where the role of ethics and ethical considerations come a lot during the choice phase, the design of the nudge phase. But then moving right along, you have the executive branch and agencies and the local, near to the population entity, which then decides what the nudge should be, how it should be delivered, what channel should be delivered. There are, nudges, of course, have been around since time immemorial. Our grandmothers have been giving us nudges to turn off lights when we leave a room. But more recently, you have rules-based nudges or AI-based nudges, which Andreas talked about, where it's difficult to analyze what were the components that drove the choices. So we call them score-driven nudges in an AI system, and the imperatives aspect come in at the at the delivery level, where you decide how big the nudge should be and so on. One of the other important aspects here is you're trying to improve outcomes, but what you're also doing is you're segmenting the populations. What populations are more susceptible to or more amenable to receiving a nudge? What populations are more rejecting of nudges? And there are many other considerations that go into this into the system. But essentially, you have populations that receive a nudge based on imperatives. You have the local or executive branch or agencies that deliver the nudge, and then you have the people who need to create the nudge to drive it. And whether it's a business, it could be a bank which has loan options, or It could be a hospital that want to give treatment options. All of these considerations come into play. So these are all in a nutshell. These are the the components of a nudging system, and the players that act. So now, how do you put this into play on a real-time basis and a runtime basis? For that, you have there are a number of different regimes that drive these real-time nudges and measurements. Andreas talked about randomized control trials and the A/B testing phases at the back end. But essentially, it's a hopefully a virtuous cycle where the nudges are created. You incorporate the ethical considerations. You eliminate the biases, and then you design the choices. And then those nudges are then delivered by an intermediary, and it could be autonomous as well. But you understand the user needs. You intervene and impart the imperatives and deliver highly personalized nudges. There is this concept called counterfactual nudging, which is that, not to spring a big word on you, but what you want to do is when you deliver a nudge, different population groups have different kinds of amenabilities. And so you can then change the type of nudge you deliver to a different population. So all of them are in sync, and ultimately the ultimate outcome is achieved. And now we come to the feedback loop. You need to test with different populations. What are the nudges that work? What are the nudges that don't work? Has the behavior changed? One of the big challenges here, when we are talking about climate change, is that behaviors that change now might have a positive impact 10 years from now or 50 years from now. So in a global context, in a population context, in a climate change context, it may make you feel good that you're doing certain things now, but there's no way to measure that the impact has been made, whether the average temperatures have gone up by a degree, which is causing all this climate change, or water levels rising. Local behaviors may not have that impact, which gives room for the naysayers, for the religious types and so on, to say this is just another thing that is being foisted on us. And this is one of the big challenges for delivering nudges. How am I doing on time, Richard?
We can manage about another 6 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So now I'll come down to specific examples on how the imperatives and ethics. So, for example, in personal behavior, whether you switch off lights in a room, when you leave the room, turn off your 7x24 device, which was the default settings, change the default settings, whether you sort your garbage on time, and the ethics for that center around whether it's worth the personal comfort and convenience. In healthcare, you're trying to reduce hospital readmissions, but reducing hospital readmissions also cuts down on the profits for the hospital. So what the ethical consideration here is, should we have the patient for a long term? This is a question that Andreas asked, which is, does the business have a mandate to impact the global health or the health of the country? And there's a lot of work in ESG that has gone on, which says that yes, they should be wary of that and take that into consideration. Likewise, in banking, when you offer cheap payment alternatives for the consumer, it can cut down on profits, and there's an ethical consideration there. When you install solar panels and reduce peak hour consumption, do you take into account the carbon footprint for the panel construction? And last but not the least, when you drive electric cars, you feel good that you're reducing emissions, but have you taken the lifetime cost into consideration? So there are cost measurements that need to be taken in toto before you decide what the nudge architecture should be. I'll say a few more words on what is the design and implementation of experiments around it. As we have done, as ScoreData has done, we have, you have to take into consideration not only the historical data sets, whichever domain you're working in, whether it's climate change or healthcare or banking, then you have to incorporate existing consumer behavior and external data, econometric data or financial data and population data. Once the nudge is delivered, you want to, you have a sense for what the impact would be. When you deliver population-based nudging, then you have to measure the impact and then refresh your system. So this is how it's been done. I'll spend a couple of minutes on how this is the work for which ScoreData got an award in terms of hospital readmissions. Just to show you, there are climate change considerations which may take a long time to measure, but there is for the planet, for health, and for personal happiness. There are some specific use cases where there is substantial benefits that can be measured within 5 years. So, for example, healthcare, global healthcare expenses, companies spend $10 trillion, US spends $3.3 trillion. The cost of patient readmission globally is $200 billion without intervention. For the US, it's $100 billion. And there are a number of reasons for waste, deadweight losses, but lack of follow-up care and poor patient engagement is the one that we are trying to fix. This is for a couple of hospital systems that we tried. Without intervention, the likelihood of readmission went up substantially, but because of intervention, you can see there is a substantial reduction in the readmission rate because of adherence to at the individual level, because of adherence to the readmission nudges, or exercise regimen, healthcare, diet changes. So what did that mean on a global basis? What that means is that a 10% reduction in hospital readmission costs. So each of those individuals, components of a larger group, 10% reduction in hospital readmissions led to an additional 1 million people got better healthcare because the readmissions were implemented. So this is the kind of act locally. Think globally and act locally. This is the kind of impact that you can have on a global basis. The United Nations sustainability goals, there are 17 sustainability goals for the United Nations. By a good system of nudges, you can ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for people at all ages, whether you're trying to improve climate, or whether you're trying to improve their health, or whether you're trying to implement just and fair and equitable systems in business. By investing in these nudge systems, you can build resilient infrastructure and foster innovation. And last but not the least, we can work globally to make that change, because one country cannot make a difference. In fact, some of the most wasteful, large, rich countries, their actions have impacts on the small countries. And so there's a responsibility for all countries to work together, cognizant of the impacts that their behavior has. Let me just go to the last slide, the summary slide. Sorry, not this one. Sorry, my Mac is I just wanted to go to the concluding punchline slide. And that is, I think, so the punchline is that recommendations and nudge engines will have a lasting impact on the planet, health, and society. That's it. How am I doing on time?
Absolutely. It is brilliant. You have been brilliant on time, and I didn't need to nudge in between in order to remind you the timing. I think, Vas, it was really wonderful. I was actually listening through, and it is so interesting when you have real life examples that you have run through, especially you started right from what is the nudge to what are the players, what are the roles they play, how important businesses are, and what is the role of UN or the corporations, governments, etc., who are playing a role into it. And while designing all these, what important architecture that you need to take into consideration, the context or the goal has to be clear. The ethics have to be defined as well, along with the choice architecture design into itself. And the population-driven nudges are so important, and the score-driven nudges is the new term that I probably learned today. And thank you for introducing to the example for the patient readmission, how it is going to help the healthcare industry. And people need to work together or collaboratively. Mainly the countries and corporates need to work together in order to bring about a positive impact for digital nudging, I would indicate. And therefore, I think whatever examples or industries you have considered in case of personal behaviors, bankings, finance, healthcare, climate change, I think more than that, there is more areas beyond that, and digital nudging can be used in a positive manner. And of course, we can't measure everything right now, as you said, but there are certain industries wherein, like healthcare, where you can measure within 5 years how it is going to be helping the population. So I think it's a brilliant talk, and I would leave you to the chat if there are any questions, and otherwise we will pick up in the panel discussion for all the questions. Thanks, Vas. It was a great talk, I must say, and inviting you, Vibha, for the community updates.
I will, if there's a demo, we've done some work on climate temperature controls and the drift of temperatures, and I can show that demo later on if there's interest. Or you can reach out to me separately and I can show you how drift technologies, AI-driven drift technologies work. So I'll be glad to share it with whoever is interested.
Thank you, Vas, for sharing that insight. And I think people will be interested. We'll reach out to you. Over to you, Vibhav.